and welcome to On Fire here on Daily Mirror. I'm Easwaran Rutnam. Our guest today is former Minister Ravi Karunanayake. Mr. Karunanayake, welcome to the program.
Hi, Easwaran.
Mr. Karunanayake, let me start off by asking you the question that a lot of people are asking these days. Are you still in politics?
Yes, very much. In the sense sometimes there are reflections for repositioning, correcting, because there have been, the UMP got a drubbing in the last election. And when you really look at it, sometimes it is a real sad situation for the country, in the sense the way the UMP got annihilated. And we look at the causes for that, I'm sure it is even more saddening as to how it has happened.
So you're still involved with the UNP?
Well, UMP is my party, and it has been that I've gone through some turbulent times where I think there have been rough times, there have been unfair situations, and I guess still there are certain rectifications that need to be done. And I guess we are in that process of learning through mistakes and trying to reposition the party to the wants of the people.
I mean, the UNP lost badly when Ranil Wickremesinghe was the party leader, and he still is, and now we see him returning to parliament. What is your take on his return to parliament?
The problem is that we had a team that was more interested in displacing Ranil Wickremesinghe rather than displacing or keeping our opponents from power. So the result was what we have seen. It basically took a toll on the people because there was infighting, and our attempt of trying to bring in the then president basically had an animosity between the then president and the prime minister, and that reflected on the people.
Could that issue have been avoided?
Oh yes, absolutely avoided. It was just mismanagement from both sides, distrust from both sides.
What is your take on the opposition? I mean, not just any particular person, but overall, do you think the opposition is strong enough? Can the UNP play a better role in future as well?
Well, if I may honestly answer, if I give a statement, it can be as if sour grapes. But there is opposition, but you see it. I guess there's absolutely no reflection from opposition. It is just an extension of the government.
I mean, what are the plans for the UNP, Mr. Karunanayake, on some of these people, not the SJB, but there are others who are still out of the party? Is there an attempt or move to maybe get them back and unite the UNP?
Well, that is our genuine intention, but I guess that approach is very poor and lacks vision. And that's where you would see, as so there are times when you can be vocal, there are times that you'll be silent and accept certain corrections. And we have to go through that phase, and that's the phase that we are going through.
So are you going to be playing a bigger role in the UNP in future?
Well, as I said, UMP is a party, but it certainly has to go through some huge changes that needs to be more people-oriented, more pragmatic, and more human. Because there's no point having power, and if the power doesn't permeate down to the people. And that was the last two attempts when he got government. There were very few people that were working for the people. It was more or less just one lot that had the benefits. But the people felt that they were estranged from this. And that was something which I guess in retrospect we see that that is the case.
What is your assessment of the government? What do you think? Do you think they've done something good for the country since they came in?
Well, I must say that it is a very turbulent time for running any government. But still, with that, there has been a lot of areas which could have been easily avoided. And I guess rhetoric has taken place. There are few people that are, trying to go along on. President is trying to steer a new approach, which that's his style. But I guess there should be consistency, coherency, and unanimity in that approach. That I don't see it.
I mean, how would you see the economic performance? I mean, you were finance minister, and now the whole focus is on the economy with COVID. What is your take on the economy?
It is easy to be armchair critic in today's days. I mean, just being at the time when we took office 2015, I must say that there was a lot of togetherness at the start. But when success was coming, then you had, people doing different ways. But I must say the Prime Minister then and myself, we had a team led by our Secretary, Dr. Samaratunga, and the officials in the Finance Ministry, and there was tremendous success. Now that in today's context is difficult to replicate because today with Corona, it is a world phenomenon, and I mean it is unfair to us, but still there are many things that can be done. You know, I guess if the President's intention is to be carried out, then the ministers must play a much more professional approach. And few are there, but the others are wanting.
But do you think some of the policy decisions that we've taken as far as the economy is concerned is the correct decision, the way we are dealing with the IMF, the way we are dealing with certain countries?
To be very frank, Easwaran, I am a believer that IMF is only there to help you when the sunshine is there and take the umbrella when the rain comes. So you have got to deal your own way of how you've got to tackle the IMF.
Didn't we have a very strong policy, connection
even
to
in the
IMF?
government of the UMP, we were basically, it was, I mean, Prime Minister and we were thinking one, but certainly at some time, some of the officials, some of the politicians tried to get just what was prescribed by the IMF put into place. And I must say that we regret, we were tough during our period, but after that, after 2017 mid, I guess there was a more leniency that was taking place, and that had the officials pandering to the IMF funds. And I must say, I appreciate the present government's role of being tough with the IMF. IMF's policies have to be adopted whether you like it or not, but how you adopt that should be with the country at first. That's the difference. Just because they come and say, ensure that the budget deficit is X percentage of GDP, doesn't have an answer in today's days. When Corona has virtually closed the world down, how can you? So on that basis, you've got to come up with something. But you have got to do, if you basically want to take the IMF on, you must be performing fiscally better than what they are basically wanting to do. Now that should have your own ways. I mean, if they say come and tax 50%, it's a non-starter. But if they say, okay, give us this amount of revenue, that's the way forward. That's how we basically did at that time. When we took office in 2015, the total revenue to GDP was 10.1%. It was 1,050 billion. When in 30 months, we managed to push it up to 1,850, which was roughly about 15% of GDP. Now, the IMF was happy because we were taking them on, but also delivering. Here also, I basically appreciate the way that the IMF is basically looked at. But they must basically deliver on the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. That is
the fuel pricing formula is also something that the IMF proposed,
well,
and then
once again, I was not a believer of the fuel policy formula, because that in today's context in Sri Lanka, if it goes up, it never comes down. So having formulas every month to this thing was something which I was not. It should have been a fuel stabilization account that was there. And that sinking fund should have basically given, then every 6 months you could basically have that variation. That's what should have been done, because Sri Lanka is such that when the prices go up, it never comes down. So even if you push it down in the next 2-3 months, you won't have the benefit going to the people.
Do you agree with the decision taken to increase the fuel prices by this administration?
Well, I don't know the mechanics and I don't want to comment on things that I don't know. But I must say that they basically waited too long for taking the benefit and also on the revenue, on the oil price increase. Because in April 2021, it hit absolutely low levels. And suddenly it rebounds in the next couple of weeks with certain international actions that taken place. So there couldn't have been a dramatic increase, but certainly I'm a believer that you shouldn't be unnecessarily subsidizing on matters which majority used by people who can well afford. That's the difference. I mean, it's a direct taxation and indirect taxation, and the user who basically wants to use it more can well afford. So if you just unnecessarily subsidize, that's the problem.
The other matter I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Karunanayake, is about the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the agreement which was something that your administration back then was pushing for, and this government has withdrawn from. How do you see that?
My sincere effort to the government was it should have gone through with the Millennium Challenge.
This
Because
administration should have gone.
they were trying to make a sandstorm in a teacup. And that was sad for the country because you were going to get a gift. And certainly there may have been strings attached, but what were the strings attached? Good management, good governance. So if that was what was going to be given to get, say, $450 to $500 million, I think it was an opportunity lost out.
Do you think we are heavily focused on China to the extent that we are even sacrificing some opportunities that are coming our way?
My feeling is that this phobia between USA, India, China, Japan, EU, I think we should basically give up. A little small Sri Lanka should be well placed. Our foreign policy should be friends with all, enemies with none. Our interest for foreign policy should be interest for the country and in its present context. So you got to basically look at that particular moment what was good to the country. We should basically do trade. I mean, our foreign policy should be
and you were foreign minister at one point as well.
That's right. It should be commercial diplomacy. And to that extent, you can't say, no, I can't take from that country, this country. What is good, go ahead. Now, if you look at the real dynamics in international trade, I put it down into three areas. One is economic trading, which basically relies on the US, EU because of market access, and basically certain areas of India and Japan, etc. But if you're looking at investments and loans, it comes in from China, it comes in from EU, multilateral countries, multilateral agencies, and certain areas that come in from EU. But if you really look at the political power play, then it is the international implications that got to come. Then it is the US, EU, and India. So when you look at these blocks, you require everybody in that. So you can't say, I can't deal with X because Y will get angry. We must stand for our principles and work fearlessly towards that. We must engage everybody. I mean, India is our closest friend. That is inevitable and we have got to do. It should not be inimical to them.
But when this government's concern is, Mr. Karunanayake, is that these countries, the US, sometimes India as well, they have strings attached with their foreign policies. They harp on human rights, they want accountability, whereas our administration has a different approach.
What should I say, the injustice anywhere is certainly no justice everywhere. And on that basis, what is this attachment, strings that are attached? If it is for good governance, what's the problem? If it is for democracy, what is the problem? But if it impinges on the government, saying that you cannot do this and certain, forceful things which are inimical to the people of the country, then yes, certainly that is there. Now, you basically said the US and the Europeans have certain strings attached. Tell me what country will give you loan for nothing?
It seems China is giving us a loan for nothing.
I wouldn't say that. But that's China. They are doing business. And we should basically make maximum economic gain out of that. You should know, they are Road and Belt Initiative. Now that should be what is good for the country. But that should not be injurious to India's intention as well. After all, they have been close. They have been helping us during the troubled times when there was aberration of peace. And so on that basis, without upsetting anybody, you must maximize the game for Sri Lanka. I would say Singapore is a wonderful example that you could look at trying to get the benefit of everybody. Likewise Dubai, likewise Malaysia, Thailand. Now without talking too much, they have got the entire world investing in the place. Now another area, Port City.
Yeah.
I think this is wonderful. I have many shouts that were there. End of the day, you need trade. We must substitute aid for trade. That is where the future is. So that's why I say we require India, we require China, we require US because they have market access. They might not give, they'll tell this, that and the other, but surely almost 45-50% of our trade goes into the US. So that is in terms, it has a preferential tariff that goes in. EU, the GSP, it has about 39% that goes in.
Japan, can we do without the GSP?
As for me, it is just adding weight onto a easy journey. So why should you? Why create a hassle when there can be hassle free? Now I must say the media plays an unwanted negative role, which basically creates a problem for the government to take a correct decision. During our time also it was absolutely mayhem. Now democracy at one extreme, we had during 2015 to 2019 government period, we had 458 protests that came into the capital city. Now you don't see that. Why? You say, is that lack of democracy, or is it that there's more discipline? Either way you can take it.
Yeah.
But you cannot have one protest every week. Who is the investor who will come to this country? Not alone foreigner, even a local guy will be worried to put their money in.
But wouldn't investors also be concerned, now the opposition as in the SJB is saying that if they come to power, they will change the policy adopted on the port city. Wouldn't investors be concerned that there is inconsistency in economic policies in the country?
These are rhetorics that are basically uttered by people who basically try to pull wool over the eyes of the public. You know, that is just a spin-off of what happened, of the tussle between Ranil Wickremesinghe and the present Lord, which we all got affected. And end of the day, people now realize what a folly it is.
But the concern about the port city has been, and it still is, even by a concern that is being raised by Ranil Wickremesinghe as well, is that this might be favoring the Chinese or Chinese investors more. Do you see that?
Well, as for me, I see it as an opportunity. I mean, a pessimist will see a problem in every opportunity, and the person who is optimistic will see opportunity in every negativity. So on that basis, I believe that the port city is certainly a way forward. And how basically you should be able to have a trouble-free investment approach. Now, how far that goes on, you'll have to see. And that is the price we have paid for giving certain things of 2/3 and not have corrective action. But my belief is that the port city must be a way forward for investments to come into this country.
Do you think that the Chinese government would ensure that even other countries also invest
I would basically say it's not Chinese, it is Sri Lankan. And everybody, I hope the majority of them will be the Indian investors that come in here. Because the Indians, the Chinese, the Japanese, Americans, European Union, all of them should be part and parcel of that. Because this was what we were looking at during our initial time, but we had certain resistance from people who did not know trade, and they were in higher office than we were, that they unnecessarily blocked it. But we should have been, within 6 months of we coming in, we should have got this and moving forward. And that is the problem, lack of visionary or unable to take the decision when we are going to take that decision has been the biggest problem for the UMP then.
The Chinese government didn't seem to work well with your administration back then. It seemed that they are favoring the Rajapaksas as opposed to maybe Ranil Wickremesinghe or Maithripala Sirisena. Is it because that you all took a different approach to the whole dealings with China?
Now, I could give an answer which is easy to accept from opposition and they say, I think it is just a over glossing of issues. My feeling is that there were opportunities. We basically had correct approach, but there were some people that dragged issues and that came to that particular point. The general feeling is what you basically mentioned, but there are certainly achievements that we did which basically had into the economic sagacity that we pursued. And that's the way that we have got to go forward. And I guess it is easy to throw that in, but I guess it is more beneficial to say that Sri Lanka had many missed opportunities.
And this administration has gone to the extent of doing away with some of the projects that the government of good governance had initiated, like the light rail project, and now I believe they're going to pay $50 billion, is it, to Japan? I mean, is that something that we can afford?
The the LRT, as opposed to it was the LRT or monorail.
Yeah.
And it was the cross that came between the two. And at even that time, there were people who had reservations in the approach that was there. But once decision is taken, you have to go forward. I guess we are just paying 6 billion rupees now for a breach of agreement. Now, you should weigh the pros and the cons and see how cost effective it has been to cancel it, then go forward with it. So, if by chance at the end of the day, cost benefit analysis shows that newer project can be done for a cheaper cost, then it is. But I doubt it. It may not have been the best transaction that it went into, but the Japanese were basically giving us certainly a technology advancement. Now, whether that came with strings attached or whether it commercially long or not is something which basically had to do. But at that time, I was not the finance minister that gave the comment on that.
Right. But as an economist, how do you see things? I mean, this administration has taken a decision to stop certain imports, vehicle imports for one, then they are focusing more on agriculture base. I mean, is that the right approach?
Easwaran, the agriculture approach has been from the day Mrs. Sirima Bandana took office, Grow More campaign, and we are still importing almost 45% of our total consumption is imported into this country. So where has our agriculture approach gone? I can remember the last president, Maithripala Sirisena, also said within 3 years we must have that more agriculture, stop imports that coming in. But still it was not achieved. So there are certain policy lacunas that are there that prevent us from doing or walking the talk. So these are the things that need to be corrected. We have been told, now we are 73 years of independence. Where have we gone on certain areas? We are certainly not economically independent. We are dependent. So on that basis, what is the purpose of rhetoric if we can't get to that point? I'm talking for 45 to 50 years. Bromo campaign has gone on. It has not gone anywhere. Likewise, we basically say we are investing on capital expenditure. But every time when it comes to the budget, the recurrent expenditure gets priority and the capital expenditure basically gets sidestepped. So what happens is today's capital expenditure is tomorrow's revenue gain. This is what has happened to this country. So I believe that lack of fiscal responsibility, financial responsibility and the fiscal ability to carry this through has been the problem. So there is no, I would say, disciplined politicians that carry that promise that is given when they come into office. That has been the problem of our society. And people also, I must say, there is, they basically look at, I just want to read, knowing the truth, seeing the truth, but still believing the lies. This is what Sri Lanka is. And that is the bane of our society. And you could see, in your TV, you are at hunger. But you look at the TV and you basically forget the hunger. Now, how long can that go on? That's the stupidity that we are in. And I guess we must call a spade a spade. That's why I'm being very cautious at this particular moment on two areas. One is not just to be a vocal critic of the government or being a critic of the opposition. But I'm just speaking of sense. Maybe the next time we meet, probably we'll be elaborating so that we are able to come to a more decisive movement.
Right. With COVID, the government seems to be saying that they are handling the economy much better than most countries. Do you agree with that?
People must feel the benefit of that. Do you see cost of living, has it reduced? Investments, has it gone? Exports, has it increased? Where does that basically substantiate in action?
And we see a serious situation with our foreign reserves as well. What is the way forward?
Now you asked about the car imports. I must say that is a salient approach in today's times because we were at times living well beyond our means. On the areas of imports of vehicles had quite an impact on our exchange rate as well. So there were many cars in the country that you can basically afford to, and that step is laudable. But that should have been done with a more pragmatic approach into the future. Now, you don't say that and then get MPs, vehicles come,
Yeah.
right? So that's one area that needs, but that's a correct step. On the other area, you should basically be more export oriented. Now, if the imports are not coming in for the exports to go, we are 63% import dependent, then we basically have a problem with the exports. Now, the reserves, I can remember 2019, 2020, roughly we were touching about 22 billion in imports and about 17.5 to about 18, 19 billion in exports. Imports 22, exports about 18 to 19. But today, now what was that 18 made up of? Roughly about 4 billion in garments, roughly about 3.5 to 4 billion in tourism, 7 billion coming in foreign remittances. Then you had tea about 1.8 billion, other exports about 1 billion. So you tantamount to about 18 billion. On the import side, you basically had roughly about 3, at that time the oil prices were slightly lower, so 3 billion to 4 billion in oil prices. Capital goods, you're roughly about 30%, intermediary goods about 20%, and the consumption of food is about 45%. That came to 22 billion. Today that's down to about 18, exports are down to about 11. Yeah, remittances is about 6.5, tourism and nothing. You had exports is roughly about, roughly it is in the range of about 7 billion. So when you add on, it's in the range of about 11 to 12. So that gap is the impact, and that has an impact on the reserves. Reserves are being spoken saying 4.1, but with hot money that is there, which means the swaps that are there with China, which is only for yuan payment, then for Bangladesh 200, then you had a SARC swap of 400, then I guess the IMF there is for contingencies, there's a grant of about 780 billion that's coming in. When you add up all of that, my feeling is it's less than that figure. But that is something which everybody has to work. I mean, this is our country and we must all put our heads together and ensure that you basically get that resurrected with correct level.
In layman terms, how will this affect individuals? How will this affect the public?
Well, one of the areas would be external dimension. When commercial banks go into opening LCs and all, will have an impact. So you must have your revenues able to meet up with the expenditure and back with the foreign reserves that are there. At the moment, that is having a serious impediment. Now, you basically have got to pay, this year you have got to pay about 6.5 to 7 billion in loans. So 1 billion basically has to be paid by July 27. You have paid maybe about 3 billion. So the balance 3 billion has to be paid before the end of the year. So when you look at that, you run into stormy waters.
I just want to go back to because since you mentioned the debt at one point, this whole assumption that by taking a lot of loans from countries like China is going to push us further and further to more debt. Do you see that happening?
Well, if your investments is going to bring in a return which is less than the cost, then automatically you go into a problem. That's what the Hambantota port was. Hambantota port is good in commercial sense, but it's not viable for the operation that is there. That is why during our tenure, we managed to give it back to the Chinese investors. Because otherwise, you would have been paying almost about the total investment was about 140 billion. You would have been paying 11 to 12 billion, which was ill affordable. Now the Chinese are doing the commercial transactions. They have to bring the ships. They have got to make the money. Government is a shareholder, and they basically have, with it, I think within 50 years or something, return back. So that's a bot operation.
So you don't agree with the term that Hambantota was sold off to the Chinese by your administration?
No way. I mean, it was something that which was commercially viable in doing so, and it was beneficial to the country. So I guess it is easy when you're in opposition to say take it back. Now when they come, what they're doing is correct. They should not do anything. Allow the Chinese to do that part. Then likewise, you must get the Indians. The West, I'm very happy that the West terminal has gone to India. That's the way trade should be going on. I mean, basically, the 85% of our exports are from India. manufactured and exported. So there's no point talking of anything else.
But Indians wanted the East Terminal. This government seems to have scuttled the relationship by deciding not to give that.
That's their folly if they basically feel that that is the way forward. But my feeling, the Indians should be given a port and that should start quickly.
Do you feel that the approach taken by this administration to forge ahead with development projects at a time when there is still outstanding debt, at a time when we are facing a COVID crisis as well, there's a lot of expenses, that doing development at the same time is the right approach?
I guess I am a born optimist that believe that economics is the way forward. End of the day, if you ask whether politics or economics, it is economics that keep politics going. So you must invest today for tomorrow. And that approach is far better than wasting time on recurrent expenditure. But if you're going to be subsidizing from birth to death and also trying to do ill-affordable things, then that's a problem. Your return must be greater than your expenditure. If that is the case, what amount of expenditure is worthwhile? And it should be done for economic returns, not to perpetuate a name or something like that.
Yeah, because would the next government have a lot to pay for as a result?
That's why I said that the return should be greater than the expenditure. If you're going to get a 1% return and you pay a 5% interest, then that is ridiculous. But if it's a reverse course, by all means.
And the tourism sector, you spoke about tourism sector earlier as well, that it's come to zero now. I mean, how do you see us coming out of that situation?
Well, it's virtually a very difficult situation. We had roughly about 2.2 million tourists coming in. Suddenly with Corona, fearful, it's not only tourists, even we are worried to go from one district to another.
Yeah.
So that has to be looked at on a very pragmatic approach. Now, what do you mean by pragmatic? You basically have to ensure that you vaccinate and ensure that you basically give the confidence that there is no Corona that is spreading, because it is. I mean, the world is on their knees. You look at when one is coming out, you have another variant that is coming out. So, but that has been that you need to forcefully get this inoculations going on. And I guess the way forward is discipline and helping the people also must get involved in making that sacrifice.
Right, Minister, Mr. Karunanayake, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on this program. That's all the time we have for you on this episode of On Fire. Till next time, have a good one.
Thank you.